Today's episode, we have a very special guest. That man is Soole. Sean has built several self-managing companies and he sits back in the investor seat, so he's got a tremendous business background, which we'll get to hear about on today's episode. But he's also transitioned and stepped out in recent years as Soole as a personal brand and making tremendous waves on the speaker circuits, putting out content as a personal brand and building a business community. And we'll get to learn about his mindset and attitude towards content and stepping out as Soole. Sean has been my mentor since 2014, and there's a great story about how that came about. And he has been invaluable in helping me build the business that I have today with the agencies and growing a team, making them profitable, and also becoming the person that I've become and helping me through those early years, becoming a father, getting married. He was there through all of that. And I'm very excited to ask Sean questions I've always wanted to ask him and share some of the wisdom that I get access to on a regular basis through the mentorship. So we'll dive straight into that episode and hear from the amazing Soole. I thought the best place to start would be rewinding the clock back to our very first meeting or exchange. Do you remember that one?
The most amazing meal that we had in the middle of Botany, I think it was, Mascot, near the airport there. Trying to find somewhere, I think it was a Sunday night, somewhere to have dinner. And all I can remember is whatever that omelette thing that came out that was basically 90% onion. Didn't look too appealing with gravy on it or something like that. That's my recollection of that time. But that was a good evening. And I remember we had a conversation about money stories. And
yes.
What was your take on that before I steal the punchline?
Well, I was looking at the situation I'd created for myself through this lens of beating myself up, ton of scarcity around it, looking at the debt that I'd created. And that's all I was really focused on. I'm not sure if you recall what you actually said to me, but in 2 sentences, you completely reframed the whole situation to me and it almost wasn't a problem anymore. Do you remember what those words were or a version of that?
I think it's to do with where people focus on how much debt that they have and not focusing on can they afford the payment on the debt. And I think it is definitely an old school thought process. Like, debt is bad, right? That's a bad thing. You've got to get rid of it as quickly as you can. You can't have debt, and understandably so. Back in that time, it probably was relevant, right? That there was a lot more scarcity. There was a lot more, a lot less, money out there, a lot less abundance and wealth in general. And we live in a time where we're more abundant now as a species, as a the human race than it's ever been in history. I'm not talking to the politics of the disparity between haves and have-nots or anything, but just generally speaking, most people, and we're obviously very lucky to be here in Australia, that we have all of our needs met, and we have support if we are struggling with getting those needs met. And I think the thing is about, if you, instead of trying to pay something off really, really fast and use every cent that you can possibly do and pay it off, if you could slow down and say, okay, what's the minimum I need to pay on this thing? Okay. And let's say it was, the minimum was $1,000 a month, but you've been paying $3,000 a month to try and pay it off quickly. What could you do with the other $2,000 instead of paying the debt off? And what could you turn it into? It's that changing a mindset of how could I use that capital and put it into something where I could take that $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. And instead of paying $24,000 off a loan where I might save, $2,000 interest in that year, if I put that $24,000 to an investment and generated $10,000, $15,000 or $20,000 out of it, which you can, particularly when you use the vehicle of business, what's a better result? Saving $2,000 or making 10 to 20 or more over time by putting it in a place where it's going to work much harder for you?
Dropping bombs right from the first question. I knew that was going to happen. Absolutely love that, mate. And what is very inspiring about your story is you started a business at a very, very young age. And I think taking the listeners back to that story is a really good framework to sort of showcase the entrepreneurial journey that you've been through and sort of taking them under the hood of what your story looks like. So tell us about that first business.
Well, honestly, I don't know where it came from because my dad was a pilot. My mum had the harder job raising myself and my three siblings, which was I know was challenging. I couldn't imagine. I've got two, and that's enough. So I couldn't imagine having to have four. But the for me, it was 1987, so I would have been just before my 13th birthday. I decided to start a car wash cafe in the front yard of my parents' house. I was about 4'2". I was driving cars from the driveway and parking them into the council's park across the road. I imagine they'd have a field day now with someone doing that. But I was making up to $200 cash in the hand on a Saturday washing cars. And so I was the richest 13, 14, 15-year-old. I transitioned that from because I had got my pocket money. I bought timber from BBC Hardware. There was no Bunnings back then, and made some A-frames and spray painted them and put them out on the street. And that's how I was getting my business. Then it was too lumpy. It was too all over the place. And I think, well, how else can I do it? So I went to school and I asked the guy that did all the printing, could I pay to have some brochures printed? So it's just some black and white, A5s. And he's like, yeah, we can do that. So I ended up paying the school to use their facilities because they wanted to support my initiative into business. So and then I took my car washing mobile for the next 3 years. And so I ended up locking in 4 or 5 washes every Saturday, every either 2-week cycle or 4-week cycle with the same people. So I ended up just continually washing cars. And mind you, it becomes like very monotonous and very draining. So I did end up stepping out of that. But I started with that, and then I got into various other things. I was working with my dad. We used to do rust repairs on cars, and I'd spray paint my mates' cars and get paid for that. And I could make $800 repairing a rust on a car in 4 hours, so, it was a shit job, but I could make good money. And so the focus was then on creating my independence. I think that's where the concept of being in business for myself and controlling my own destiny was about creating independence, because I'd seen my parents struggle. I'd seen a difficult business situation where my dad got screwed by 2 business partners who signed all these checks and stuff. And my dad was the guarantor and everything. Now he was working full time as a pilot, and he was doing this business with 2 mates on the side who then screwed him and other people out of a couple of $1 million and left Australia and went overseas and never came back. And so he was left holding the rubbish that was left behind. He ended up having to pay that off. It took him like 12, 13 years to pay all that back off, right? So we were in a very challenging situation financially when I was growing up. And I think that was a great driver for me to go, I don't want that. I don't want other people controlling what I do. I don't want to have to, my dad was hardly there, a lot of the time because of his job, traveling overnights, all that sort of stuff as an airline pilot. And so I'm like, but I don't want to have to go to work on that day if I don't want to. So I started sort of rebelling against it, I suppose, in my own sort of way. And then went through, varying different businesses and all sorts of stuff. And mind you, the main thing is for the first sort of 17-ish years from when I was, when I started that to 17 years later, is that I sucked at business. I was great at making money because everyone used to tell me, you're so good with money. I'm like, oh, so being good with money, you must be making it and spending it, because that's all I did. I made it and I spent it. I didn't invest it. I bought flash cars, or did up cars. I had lots of toys and things like that. But that was my definition of being good with money, is because people told me, oh, you're so good with money. And that was what I realized later, is that was their frame, is you're so good at making money, but I sucked at keeping it.
That's very interesting, because I think that'll hit home with some of the audience. And it's interesting the language that people use and the stories that they tell you and how we buy into that. But on that business note, I know what you went on to build in several industries. You've built a lot of self-managing companies, but one of the businesses that I'm very curious to pick your brain on and to understand a little bit is a business you built to over 40 employees, and I believe it was approaching 8 figures in revenue around the GFC time. And I was just curious, how do you scale a business to that size, especially if you're telling me now that for the first 17 years that you sucked at business?
Yes, I often ask myself the same question over time. It's like, how the hell did I do that? Well, I basically, I nickname it affectionately my 44-person adult daycare center, except I had to pay them to be there. Because my leadership style was, hey, as you're breathing, there's an empty chair there, you're hired. Sit there and look busy. I'm sure that there's something that needs doing because I'm doing 100 hours a week. Everyone's busy. And so we must need more people. So we just kept getting more people. More people, and it just became. We ended up having offices in 4 different states. I was flying interstate, Melbourne, and between Sydney and Brisbane, and Sydney, Melbourne, each alternating week. And I was driving to Canberra and back at least once a week. If anyone's driven from Sydney to Canberra, that's the most boring drive in the universe. And so I was leaving at 5 a.m. and get back at 11 o'clock at night, and probably wasn't that safe either. I hit some roadkill that took half the front of my car off once. Wombats are just like a big, it was already hit by somebody else. Thankfully, I didn't kill it, but it was like hitting a boulder. My car launched into the air when I hit it, and like it was dangerous. It was just a shit time. It really was. But what was keeping me going is my ego. My ego was, I'm the CEO of this group. I had business partners at that point. We had 10 different trading entities, from legal practice, property, insurance, finance, like all this sort of stuff, which I started building up from 2000 when we started those businesses. And we built them up. We were on the path to hit 8 figures, probably within that next 12 months of when all the GFC stuff started happening. And our clients were coming from financial planners, and at that point they became known as the devil. No one wanted to deal with financial planners because it was all their fault. Not necessarily, but that's how the sentiment was. And our whole business was built on referrals from predominantly financial planners and accountants and things like that. But our business then went from, approaching, I think it was 7.5 mil at that stage, maybe 8. We'd been doubling pretty much year on year for the last 4 years at that point. And down to about 1.2, right? So it dropped dramatically. I also decided at that point when I felt like a massive failure when that was happening in myself. And I had a life event that personal life event that rocked my world a bit, and it was a bit of a proverbial wake-up call where I actually went, what do I actually want? Because it's not this. And I've been hanging on to this for dear life. And it switched then in me. It said, well, this is an opportunity. The opportunity was I walked into my business partners at that point. I think I had 3 business partners at that point across all these businesses. And I said, okay, guys, one of 2 things is going to happen after we have this meeting now. And I said, I'm either going to pack my shit and I'm going to walk out and I'm not coming back, which I said the last thing I thought I was going to say when I started these businesses. Or we're going to break up this monster that's trying to kill all of us. And within about 2 hours, we'd all made the decision that on some level, we're all feeling the same way, that this thing was a monster trying to kill us. So we wound it back, and I went from doing 80 plus hours, 80 to 100 hour weeks, like literally, for many years, to within 8 weeks, dropping to about 20, 25 hours a week, and doubling my personal income. Not that it was large at that point, but it got me back into the black, right? Because mind you, during that time, the businesses were growing and all sorts of stuff, but growth chews cash, right? So whilst that business was growing so rapidly, $7.5 million, personally, I went into a $657,000 hole in my mortgage, and 157 grand of that was credit cards, right? So the business couldn't fund us as the owners. It was all being plowed back into the business, which was just, like I said, sucked at business, right? It was all attached to, we've got clients like Optus and Flight Centre and NAB and all sorts of stuff, and this ego thing about how I was being perceived. But then I realized that once I got back to 25 hours a week, I was sitting there clicking send and receive on my Outlook, going, what the hell do I do now? And it was the hardest 3 months of my life at that point, of going, I've got to do something different. This is like a whole resetting my identity. So my identity was doing 400 or 500 emails a day, and just putting out all these fires. Suddenly half the fires, most of the fires weren't there anymore. And so it was such a profound change where I said, okay, well, people say, well, if you've got the time now, and I was drawing enough money to go back into the black and start moving forward again. Not a lot, but enough to be comfortable enough. You know what I mean? And it's just like, well, one, I want to sell my legal practice, which I did the next year. So then that dropped back to under 10 hours a week. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm in that place where I've got enough money to just survive, right? Not lavish lifestyle, but enough. So People say that to you. If you had enough money and time, what would you do? And that's a really hard question to answer when you're sitting in that, because you literally could do anything, but you can't do everything. And so that's when I started to realize that it's for me, it was going back to being about people. I love working and helping people grow. It wasn't about business for me. It actually was about people. And, the key people out of that 44 people I had in that business are still with me today. I've still got 3 of those people still work with me today that have been, 2 of them 17 years and 1 16. And, they were holding the internal ship up in that throughout that period of time. And, it's in that period too, that 17 years where I sucked, I also had clinical depression. And I'm not surprised. I had no life. I had no self-worth, that it was identified through what I was achieving or not achieving in the business. So if I had a kind of a good day, I felt good. If it had a bad day, which were more than the good days, I felt bad. And so I was completely out of whack, completely out of alignment. It wasn't clear on my purpose or my mission or my vision or any of that. I was just literally head down and pushing and pushing and pushing, but not realizing that the car was in gear and had the handbrake on. So no wonder it was so hard to push and up a hill at the same time, right? So it was just until I realized, and it was when I started to bring on mentors that started to help me to see things differently, that started to change.
Amazing. And on that note, one of the areas that has been very impactful for me with you being my mentor is your mindset towards building businesses. When I started to see the way that you looked at that, it definitely changed the lens through which I look at building assets and companies. You want to share a little bit on that? What's your mindset towards building businesses?
Well, a business often is going to be one of the most valuable assets that people create in their life. Right? Yeah, they might have a home and stuff like that, and over time pay it off. But it's not an asset. You can't eat it. You got to live in it. And if you move out of it, you either live in a tent or you go and live in another house. So it's actually not an asset. It's just it's a home, and you got to move that out of your asset column and go, okay, well, it's actually an expense. It's a living expense, yes, but it's an expense because I can't eat it. I can't use it. Whereas a business is effectively to be building it. And the methodology or the framework that I follow is, how do you build a business so that it doesn't need you to be there? So in other words, what we term as a freedom business. So it gives you the choice whether you work in the business or not. And I have, the remnants of those businesses that I started back in 2000 and 2001 still run today. I haven't worked in them for 10 years. They still give me income. I get a report. I invest about 20 minutes a month on that business. And whenever I talk to my key manager, Michelle, in that business, it's about how's she going? How's her husband? Like, how's everything else? Blah, 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 blah. It's got nothing to do with the business because she runs it, right? She's running it for years. And so building businesses that don't require us is, for me, and in part of what I teach is we have a thing called the foundational core. And one of the elements of that is my definition of success, right? Is getting people to define what success means for them. And I don't know anyone that's a private jet and a 50-meter yacht, right? Nobody has that as a definition of success. Mine is the freedom to choose and the impact I have on those around me. That's success for me. That's how I feel successful every day, not as a destination. And so when we apply those principles back into business, it's like, okay, how do we build a business that doesn't need us in it as soon as humanly possible? And because business is a system, it is not complicated. People complicate business. And usually we're the most complicated because we're the one that jumped off the cliff and went, oh crap, I need to build an airplane before I hit the bottom and go, and we've never built an airplane before. We might be a great plumber, electrician, engineer, doctor, it doesn't matter what it is. We're skilled in our craft, but business is a whole nother skill. Realistically, people should be getting into business, should also do a 3-year, business learning before starting one to make it successful. But you're given an ABN, a tax phone number, and a bank account. Good luck. That's it. Yeah, and you take your skill or your trade, and then you realize that you suck at business because you don't know how to do it. And there's money stories, and you listen to people at barbecues that give you advice, about what you should do or shouldn't do. And unfortunately, we often listen to those people because we respect them, even though they have no right actually giving us advice in that area, because it's not their area of expertise, it's just their opinion. It's not actually advice. And it's an opinion that's not coming from a place of education. So my view is create a business in a way that you move yourself out of elements of it as quickly as you can. As soon as there's additional profit over and above your baseline living expenses, invest it in more resourcing, more team. Take you out again. How do I save another day, another 2 days, so I can level myself up, level myself up, level myself up? And Michael Gerber in E-Myth, he talks about, he's a funny guy. I did an event, I was on the shared stage with him. He looks like the guy. It looks like either the Colonel Sanders from KFC or the guy from the original Jurassic Park. Right? He's a white suit and hat and stuff. And he literally had everyone eating out of his palm. He would say something like this and then pause, and you couldn't hear it. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Everyone was just enthralled. The way he carries himself. He's such a great speaker, and he talks about the concept of, you got to be either is in the business or on the business, a technician or manager, right? But then the next layer is is the business owner, or what term is the investor in your own business? Is the technician, you're doing it all. The manager, you're managing people doing it, and you're probably still doing some of it. And that's the in and the on the business. The problem with people say, oh, I've got to go from in to on the business. You're still in the business while you're working on it. You're not free of it. It's still an extension of you. The next layer is becoming an investor in your own business and thinking about and making decisions from that place. That if I was an investor in somebody else's business, what would I suggest for them to do next? And to remove the emotional attachment that we have to our businesses so that we can step back from that, or get in the helicopter and go right up high and look at our entire business in one go and go, there's a problem over there, we need to fix it. There's a bit of a drought, there's a bit of a fire. Let's address that, so that the business continues to run. And it is about getting it to a point where you don't have to be in it. If you love it, still don't have to be there. Just do the bits that you absolutely love to do, because that's what makes you feel successful. Then is you're doing those elements you want to do. And even with a personal branding business that I have, I do the bits that I want to do. I do the speaking. I do the events. I connect with business owners and support them on their journey. Right. I don't book venues. I don't try and arrange catering or AV or anything like that. I've got a team that do that. But that's what we should have in our businesses is where do we want to be? And let's create it as that. Because once you've built it as that and you've got the time back, you can put that time into whatever you want. You can buy another business. You can go and sit on the beach and read a book. I'd last 20 minutes before I get bored. You can go and do, philanthropic things. If your business is producing enough profit, you can actually go and give back if that's important to you. You can travel the world. You can become a freaking race car driver or a rock star. Doesn't matter. Like, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter. You can do any of it when you create that freedom.
Yeah, I have a question that I was saving, but it kind of flows nicely in here. And I've seen firsthand you help and support several business owners make that transition to having a self-managing company / freedom business where they don't have to be involved in the running or operations of that company. If you were to give some tips on how to create that, and you've already touched on a few, is there anything that sort of stands out when it comes to building a business like that?
There's one thing that stands out that is in the last 12 months, it's become really, really clear. The difference between those that create what I deem as a successful business is a business that doesn't need you to work in it, right? If you're making $1 million a year, but you're still working 60 hours a week, that's not a successful business as far as I'm concerned. And we base 2 key metrics we measure is money and time. That's all you need to measure in your business at the top level to see whether or not you've created a freedom business. Have you got enough money to sustain your lifestyle at level you want that you can draw from the business? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Have you got time? Because if you've got the money and no time, you're not able to do anything, right? So what came from that, we launched that last year, that concept, and in a circle group. And what came from that is the difference between those, as you said, there's been quite a few that have created that, and many on the path to doing that now in who we're working with. And it's the decision, right? People need to, the higher level of certainty and I suppose absoluteness, for want of a better term, I don't know if that's a word or not, that someone has in their conviction around the decision to say, you know what, I am going to create this. Not I'm going to create this. I'm going to create it. Maybe possibly one day something I really hope that I wish I could. Which is not a decision. That's a wish, a hope, a desire. But if you're like, yep, I'm going to do it, but damn, I don't know how. I need help. I need help to actually create it. And the people that accelerate the fastest, in our inner circle group, our goal is to take people from stuck in their business to creating a freedom business. So a business where they can choose to work with it or not within 3 years or less. We've seen people come from working, again, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, been away from their families 5, 6 days a week consistently for years, who in 2 years, just over 2 years, have gone from that to 400% increase in their profit to into the well and truly in the 7 figures of profit, and dropping their time they work in that by down to 20 hours a week or less, but also building other assets in the same time, $5 million more than what they had 2 years before. And you know what? They didn't know how. They're not the smartest, intellectually smartest people around, but what they did was they go, we've made a decision. It's not that we don't want this anymore because it's running away from something. You need to run towards something, right? Running away is very negative energy, but running towards is very positive energy. So if you've got a vision of what you want to create in your life and you've made a decision, I'm going to get there. You just need people to guide you to get there, because that is one of the biggest differentiators between someone who's successful and someone who's not. Because that person that's made the decision is willing to take on board the suggestions, take on board the lessons and the learnings, which for what we teach are business basics that we've refined based on the current environment, technology, all that sort of stuff, but they're same business basics. And one of my favorite C words, they're done consistently. That's it. And you know what that becomes? It becomes boring. You create a successful business is if you're a bit bored with having to do the same thing over and over again, and your team having to do the same thing over and over again, because that's what creates a successful business. Repetition, okay? Doing the right things over and over and over again. Think of it in a sporting context. Michael Phelps trained 7 days a week. All the other people trained 6, pretty much. He was the only person that trained every single day. And he smashed him, right? Jordan used to finish, they say Michael Jordan used to finish the practice and then he would shoot another 100 free throws before he'd leave. Right? More practice, more consistency, more doing the basics right. And that's what creates success. It's not hey, we've got this newest fandangle AI-driven Facebook marketing funnel that's going to get you so many leads. It's going to be like a dam's burst, in your face. This rubbish that you hear out there, just fucking ignore it. Pardon my French, but just ignore it, right? And this whole concept of these BHAGs, this big, hairy, audacious goal, is just BS. Get clear on what you really want. What do you really want? Do you want some choice? Do you want some freedom? Because most people we work with, their number is somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. If you said an average was $400,000 a year drawing from their business, you can create a $1.5 million, $2 million business and be drawing that sort of money from that business. And you can have it running predominantly, if not completely, without you. So don't have this pie in the sky, I want a $10 million business and 50 locations with 1,000 team members, because that's just a big headache. If you want it, great, go for it. But most people don't. They actually want to get more choice, more time back, to have more experiences in their life, be it with their family, their friends, traveling, doing other interesting things. And it comes back to that, is have something that draws you towards it, clear vision of your future. What do you want it to look like? And get the people that can walk with you and help you get there with the least amount of injuries in the shortest amount of time.
On that note, too, with the injuries and the low points, which is where a lot of people enter your community with that pressure of working 80, 100-hour weeks, the profit or the numbers aren't clear, they don't have that direction. I know you're extremely, and you already have been open and vulnerable with parts of your journey. Was there a low point for you in your business career that you're open to sharing?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. I guess one of the key low points was around my numbers, right? And one of the nicknames that my clients have for me is he's the numbers nerd, or Rain Man, because I do a bit of Rain Man-y kind of stuff with the numbers. But I didn't always do that. I avoided it like the plague, because I knew deep down that as soon as I faced my numbers, it would show me how shit a business person I was. Simple as that. And eventually I did it, and I looked at my numbers, and it absolutely floored me for the next 3 months. I was that close to giving up on everything and just pulling the pin, just walking away. Like it took some support from. I finally reached out for some support for some external people rather than doing it all myself. So I was running my dad's story, which he shared in essence to help serve me and help support me, which was, mate, if you want it done right, do it yourself, because it'll be better and you'll do it cheaper, right? And I lived with that till my early 30s, and but then eventually I'm like, hang on, this is not what I believe. I don't actually believe that. That might have served him as a baby boomer in his life and all this stuff, but I said, thank you for that, but I don't believe that anymore. I actually need to leverage off other people and not try and do everything myself anymore. And when I went through those numbers, had a look, it literally was the proverbial kick to the guts. Like I was absolutely winded. And so the first 4 weeks I was non-functional after that. Like I just was like, what's the freaking point? The second kind of month, I started to sort of go, okay, well, what could I do? In the third month, I started taking some small actions. And what I realized as I continued to move forward from there over the next 3 months and then the next 3 months is that the things that I was changing were deliberate and they were related back to the numbers. And I started seeing, I pulled this lever and that number went up. Oh, interesting. And I pressed this button and that expense went down. Shit. So then I started to get more confidence around it and go, okay, well, what if I do this? And I could start seeing the data. I could start seeing what was actually happening in my business. And interestingly, I was talking with a client of mine yesterday, and this person's business in one financial year went from $4.2 to $12.8 million in revenue, right? Their profit went from $100,000 on their financials to minus 750 in the next year. So they 300% growth and 800% reduction in profit into $750,000 of a loss. And this person, I'm like, okay, so what's that expense? I don't know. It's $67,000. How do you not know what that is? Oh yeah, I've been busy doing blah blah. I said, you've got contracts coming up over the next 18 months that could see your business grow to $80 million business, right? Or more. Your business will implode if you do not understand your numbers, if you do not get the mindset around that. I said, what I'm sensing is a couple of things: lazy leadership, complacency, and you're trying to be your team's friend and not the boss. I said, what other person out of your 50 team or whatever it is, 40 team, what other person in the last 2 years has taken a hit like you of $800,000? Well, actually, it was 950 with the last year. It was 150 loss as well, which is better than 750, but it's still another 150 loss, right? And he goes, nobody. I said, no, you and your family have. And do you think your team actually really give a crap? Because they're just getting in there doing the same thing. I said, and it's your fault because you're a lazy leader. And your mindset around money and expenses and she'll be right, mate. Just, yeah, it's all good. Your team live that day to day. And that realization in my life and then seeing it in other people's situations as well, you cannot grow a successful business without understanding your numbers. Like it's such an important part of business, and most people don't. They avoid it for some reason. That I wasn't good at numbers at school, or I don't understand it. So that's a bullshit excuse. Pull your finger out and learn it, because if you can use a calculator and go 1 + 1 = 2, then you can use a spreadsheet, because that's all that is. It's just a big calculator, and it might take you 3 to 6 months to learn it, but once you learn it, there's no going back. You'll start making much better decisions, and you'll create that freedom business much, much sooner.
I'll give you a plug on that note, because that's been one of the areas that you've had a tremendous personal impact with myself, and to the cent daily, I know where the business stands, and it completely changes how you feel, your ability to make decisions. And up until the point where we started working closely together, I was in that bracket of not knowing the numbers, hope and pray. Let's see what the tax office says this year.
Yeah, run your business off your bank account. So there's money in there. Cool, I can spend it.
Exactly, the ATM of the business bank account. And if there's anything that you can get support with, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the episode, it's your numbers with Sean, because it is life-changing. And let's pivot on this note a little bit to the other side, to the highlights. What would you say has been a highlight in your business journey, career so far to date?
I'd say the highlight has been the relationships that I've built with the clients that I work with, because we only work with, in the inner circle group, a maximum of 100 businesses. I get to know, and my team get to know, like yourself, you're one of my closest mates. So through working with you and supporting you and Paula on your journey and all that sort of stuff, and I've built so many incredible lifelong relationships from people, and I have observed them shift and adapt. I've observed the change in their kids, how their kids speak, how their kids, interact with people. Like, for me, that's legacy. That's what is the biggest highlight for me, is seeing me impact somebody like yourself and see that translate in how you show up for Bailey, for example, right? Or I look at other clients who say, that, oh, my daughter there was 5 spots at this private school and 100 kids went for it and had to do she was like 11. She had to do a presentation to the whole school board of like 8 people about why they should put her in the school. And he recited back, he was in tears telling me this. He said, she recited back this, and this. And it was all this, I've got goosebumps again. And I was in tears after he said it to me too, because the impact is all the stuff we've been teaching him. She'd somehow been exposed to it through him, through the stuff that he'd been listening to or watching on our, members area content. And she used those same lessons and got one of those 5 spots out of the 100 kids in that private school by how she showed up. And that to me is legacy. It's change. And my purpose, which for many years was helping people succeed. And late last year, sort of second half of last year, I started feeling a bit lost. And Eric on my team, who's one of my closest mates too, he said, Sean, are you sure it's not your purpose? You might, no, my purpose is fine. It's all good. 6 months later, I'm like, I think it's my purpose, eh? I think you're right. And I'd gone away from that, and it took some work with some other people that I know to uncover it, which is my purpose personally is to change the world one person at a time, right? Because I believe that depth of change, when you work with someone and get to know them so well, that we all need someone we respect to call us on our bullshit more often, right? Because that's where growth happens. And everyone's like, yeah, you're a great singer. And then they go on one of those singing shows and they're like, you're horrendous. Well, my family says I'm great, You don't want that. You want people to actually say, you know what, I wouldn't go on that show. You're going to embarrass yourself, right? Because you really are a terrible singer. They might not like it, but we need that, right? The people in our lives to be able to support us on that journey. And again, that's the highlight, is the people. The people. I can go anywhere in Australia, New Zealand, places like that, and go and just have a meal and talk about life and stuff with so many people that I've been involved in and had the privilege of supporting them on parts of their journey, and it's just been incredible, and I look forward to doing it every single day.
Tell me about that evolution from going from essentially being a businessman, owning multiple companies, putting them under management, to stepping out as Sean Soole, which is a big giant step. How's that experience been?
Oh, that sucked. It was coming from quite an extreme introvert. So my first foray, I suppose, into putting myself out there is I used to be in an alternative rock band for about 11 years. And you can see one of my guitars in the background here. Really, and this on the other side here this is a picture from the Matrix, right? It says the choice is yours, the red pill or the blue pill. Which one are you going to take? And that was that point in time that I talked about before where I had to make a decision. Do I stay with what I'm doing, or do I literally take the red pill and do something completely different and put myself out there? And that was one of the hardest things I ever did. And I remember the first time, and I thought, okay, I need to start getting out there and speaking, public speaking. And I can tell you, when you've got a guitar and a microphone and a stand in front of you, it's a very different experience. Yes, it's still nerve-wracking to get up and sing and stuff in front of people, but I would have much rather get up and sing in front of people than stand on a stage and speak. Right? People say that for most people, speaking in public is a higher fear factor than death. So that was me. I was way up there. Anyway, I got offered a 45-minute speaking spot and on a 3-day event. And I'm like, oh, shit. I said, sure. I just said yes. And then I started crapping myself, right? Because I just, as they say yes and then figure it out. And so I'm like, okay, I actually did that yesterday. There's a speaking opportunity that's come up locally here. And I just said yes to it. And it's a bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm like, I'll sort it out. I've had worse. Anyway, about 2 weeks before, I get a call and they say, hey, Sean, do you reckon you could make your session 90 minutes instead of 45? I'm like, well, sure, no problem. And they're like, and it's the last session on day 3 on Sunday afternoon at 3:30, which is like the graveyard shift. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyway, so I ended up creating this 90-minute presentation, which I practiced in full 19 times. I tracked it. I videoed it and I played some of it back to see how much better. Anyway, I got up there and someone who was helping me to learn how to speak a bit said, dare to suck. Yep, I sucked. Had no presentation skills. I basically talked at the audience for 90 minutes, but still 2 of those or 3 of those people in the audience are still friends of mine. So it can't have been that bad. So unless I just felt, because I didn't know them until that event, I can't have been that bad. Either that or they felt sorry for me, but that was really, really challenging. And then, immersing myself into environments, deliberately immersing myself in environments and volunteering myself to immerse in environments that were involved around speaking, working with people, mentoring, all the sort of stuff, coaching, accelerated my growth and my skills in that space very, very rapidly. And then I got to apply those, all the screw ups that I'd had in business. And I could see other people doing them and saying, "Haz, don't do that. I tripped over that log 29 times. Can you see what my face looks like? You've just tripped over it once. Let me show you how to move it so you don't trip over it again." And so I know that people are like, "Oh, Sean, you could take what you learned now and go back to when you were 25 and do it all again." I'm like, well, no, I couldn't, because I had to go through all that crap to learn what I learn now. So I'd like to know what I know now to be able to have the impact that I have on people. Because without that, I wouldn't have the tools that I have now. So I wouldn't change anything.
Amazing. And we're going to transition elegantly into the theme of the podcast now, because I really want to pick your brain on content and the way you approach it. And you have content going out across your different social mediums every single day of the week. For those of you that will, I'm sure, start following if they're not already after this episode, what is your mindset towards content creation?
So for me, content comes naturally when somebody asks me a question, right? So I find it, and I worked with Paula a few weeks ago on a sales page video, and it was like a 7 or 7.5 minute video. It took me 3.5 hours to do it. Because I sucked so bad at it, because this kind of pre-framed, is it too salesy? Is it going outside my level of integrity, or how's it going to be received? And trying to read and remember a script is just not my strength, right? And so for me, creation of content is about someone asking me a question and me giving them that small nugget they can take away and apply. That for me is content. Now, the value of content is the expansion of the impact that I can have. Yes, I can work with 100 businesses in Inner Circle and 20 businesses in our investor boardroom, which sits above the Inner Circle. And But how do I impact more people? How do I still change the world one person at a time? Because I know there's people that I haven't worked with directly that have watched some of the content or webinars or things that I've done in the past, and they've applied it and come back to me and say, hey, Sean, that thing you taught then, I've applied it and this has been a massive outcome for me, massive positive outcome for me. And so content to me is about the ability to have an impact at a much broader level to many, many more people. At the time of recording this, your team in Content Only is putting our content out for us, because again, someone stick a camera in my face and say, ask me a question. I'll like this, I'll respond, I'll give you an answer, I'll give you some nuggets to take away. But don't make me edit it. Don't make me post it on social media. So that's just above my pay grade. Like I've got no idea how to do that. So, and again, I deliberately didn't try and learn how to do that, because then I just get pulled into doing $25 to $50 an hour jobs rather than being able to focus on things where I can have opportunities that can be worth 5, 10, even $50,000 an hour. Some of the opportunities that I've worked on over time, like acquisitions and things like that, buying businesses, my hourly rate's much higher than that. So I'm not going to waste my time doing that when someone else can do it faster and better than I can. So give it to them and allow me to make more impact on more people.
Funnily enough, 2 of my team members have said, I love working on Sean's content because I get to learn something while I'm doing the work. So inside the team, you're having an impact just there as well. But you also have a unique approach to content. How would you describe it?
For me, content has to be authentic. It has to be real. As part of that foundation core I mentioned before with the definition of success, one of the other 8 blades on that propeller, it's a propeller image, is the definition of leadership. And for me, my definition of leadership for the last 8 years or more has been humble, or I am humble, authentic, and vulnerable. That's the yardstick I measure myself against. So I'm not going to be out there going, yeah, you need a private jet, and I'm going to lay on top of a Lamborghini in front of someone's private jet or yacht and be all spruiking this rubbish, right? To me, that just has no value whatsoever. It's what's real, what's tangible, what's direct, and what's going to give impact about in me being an authentic, in an authentic approach that is genuine. That I see the results that people get by applying what I teach. And what I teach is, I used to be nicknamed the sledgehammer, and I've had conversations with people recently that I don't do it that way anymore. I used to do it a bit blunter. But a number of people now have referenced it as the scalpel. The goal is to find, if someone asks a question, is to go back with a scalpel, very neatly cut the hole, fix the thing, stitch it up again, right? Rather than blunt force, is to get people to see the nuance in what they're asking, get really clear on what the question is, and then give them something they can go and apply straight away. And you have to be authentic, it has to be real. And why I call myself a mentor and not a coach is because a mentor is somebody who's actually been there and done it. A coach can be someone who's learned it from a book or a course for 2 weeks, right? I'm not saying that coaches are bad. There's plenty of great coaches out there, but if you want someone with real experience, you need to find someone who can actually mentor you because they've actually done it before themselves and they've tripped over that log 29 times till they figured out how to get over it, right? That's where their life lessons have come from. And that's where their value comes from.
Amazing. And from the investor standpoint, what would your advice be to, let's say, one of your inner circle members building a freedom business, looking at content as the investor in their business?
Well, definitely one of the things is leverage. Content to me is about leverage. And yes, there's people go, oh, but there's so many businesses out there doing it. But still, it's probably only 5% of businesses. It just looks like a lot, just because the algorithm, because you're in roofing, you probably see lots of roofing stuff, right? Because the algorithm's showing you all of that. But still only 5% of roofing businesses are probably doing content, right? So it's not actually that competitive. So for me as an investor, and depending on the type of business, because some businesses don't need content per se to market, they do different styles of marketing, whether it's referral-based or partnership-based marketing or things like that. But for those that can benefit from content, and particularly when it comes to you portraying your employment brand, because I know in the current market, at least here in Australia, is that there's an employment shortage. There's not enough skilled people, and I've got members in Inner Circle. I mean, you know them as that need 4 to 6 team right now because they've got so much work, but they just don't have the team. They just cannot get the skilled team. And so by making your bait shinier, fishing in the right place at the right time with the right bait, you're more likely to catch the fish. So content can also work not only for positioning or awareness, to potentially market and sell for your business, but can also attract talent into your business, talented team members into your business.
And what have you noticed on a personal level as more and more content has gone out under the Sean Soole brand?
For me, it's brought up, I'm proud of the content that I put out, despite getting, trolls saying horrendous things in comments about another F-wit. This just puts himself out there thinking he's all that and all the rubbish, which I don't feel that much anymore. There's 2 words, block, delete. They're not my target audience. So I'm not going to share stuff with them that I'm doing generously if they're going to be like that. So I'm just going to block, delete them. But we're always going to be idiots like that. But for me, I'm proud of the content that I put it there. And I really love the fact that I know that day or night, someone's watching something somewhere, and that one thing could make a change to their life. That one thing, like you said, as that horrendous meal that we had, which was one of the best conversations. The food was shit, but the conversations were amazing. Is that it had a profound shift on you, and it was 2 sentences out of that conversation. And that's what I try and capture in the content, is those 2 sentences. So when that person is ready to hear it, they hear those 2 sentences in a 60 to 90 second or 3-minute video. And they're like, whoa, shit, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And they go and do something about it. Because they call it shelf help. It's when you've read every book under the sun, listened to every podcast, done every course, but don't apply any of it. And that concept that knowledge is power, well, it's not. Knowledge is knowledge. Knowledge applied in the real world, that's power.
And what's the content vision for Sean Soole now that you've got your own purpose, you've got your leadership definition, you've got this growing community? What does that look like long-term for you?
For me, more and more of it is about, it'll expand into what I'm moving into over the next year, which is with a couple of partners. I'm going to be going and rolling up or acquiring a number of businesses. I find that fun. It's a great way to have freedom businesses is to buy them. It's not set them up, and buy them in industries where you can't do the work because you're not skilled to do it. Right? So it means you don't have a choice but to have it run without you. Right. So we're going to roll those up, and my goal will be is to start teaching people, like, hey, we're just working on this deal at the moment. This is the things that came up. These are the roadblocks we saw. This is how we negotiated around it, and just teach what we're doing. Right. Teach what I'm doing. Not, hey, one time back in 1885, I did this thing and it was great. Right. Yes, we've all got those past stories, but I find it's much more powerful and much more relevant if you're talking about what you're doing now and what you're doing at the right in this moment, to give people that sense of the time, that this is almost live. They're almost watching this situation unfold live, and I think that's probably where the content's going to go. I think at some stage I'll get back into doing another podcast. I did step out of the Few podcast with my good mate Boo, the former Australian Air Force fighter pilot, and he took over that brand and he's now running the Few on his own. He's moved to the US as well to do that, but it just wasn't aligned anymore with where I was heading, and needed to step out of that. So I'll probably do that again. I think because podcasts are a great conversation. Like, I listen to a lot of content because I'm way too slow at reading. I'm horrendous, like 60 to 90 minutes, 90 words a minute maximum if I'm lucky. So I don't comprehend very well when I'm reading, but I listen. And I know that podcasts are a great way. Listening to someone's book is 10, 20, 30 years of their life in 5 or 6 hours of audio of all their golden nuggets, which is so profoundly powerful. But that's like someone's talking at you, right? When I love podcasts because it's like someone's talking with you. It's almost like you're part of the conversation. And so I feel that that's probably where it's going to go as well, is teaching more of the deal, the transactions, the challenges that have come up in buying a business, which are then going to be the same challenges as someone who owns and is building a business, and be able to teach it that way.
Amazing. And what tips around technology, team, AI, all the leverage components would you pass on to listeners?
So for me, there's always going to be something new, right? Uh, Email at some point was new. The internet at some point was new. Video conferencing was new. AI is new. Okay. So it is just another tool. Don't listen to those tools out there promoting it as the best thing and it's going to take your job and also stuff in the next 5 minutes. Will it change the landscape in some ways? Absolutely, it will. Right. But what I look at is, okay, well, if it's going to be a benefit to my team and help save time and energy and effort and allow my team to be thinking at higher levels and AI can start doing some of the baseline functions in my business, then we need someone to teach my team how to do that, because I'm not interested in knowing how to post a Facebook ad just as much as I'm not interested in how to make AI do something. I just need to know what it's capable of doing and how can I apply that to my business and get someone who's got the skill set to do it, right? So you can always keep learning all these new things, but at what time are you enough? Do you know enough to just put yourself out there and actually do it, rather than continually, I need to know a bit more and I want to learn this and I want to learn that. That's just avoidance and procrastination, I feel, in a lot of ways. Is that, it was one of my mentors in the past, probably 15 years ago, that said, Sean, why do you continue to chase all this learning and this growth? You are enough right now. Back yourself. And I did. And everything else accelerated because I've been distracting myself with just learning and not applying and not doing. And it's so important that that when we're looking to build a business, is start with that view in mind that I'm only doing this action or task or responsibility until I get to this point. And if you know your numbers, you know what point that is financially. Or I'm then going to hire this person to come in and do it. Or I'm going to hire content only to come and do the content and put it out for me, right? Because I know it's going to cost me X amount a month. I need to generate this much to get there. When you know those milestones are coming, it gives you something to chase. I need an extra $3,000 a month to pay for X, Y, and Z. Do you think you're going to chase it down faster because you know it's just going to be $3,000 a month? Hell yeah. You're like, at some point I'm going to put someone on to do this. You're kind of floating along. No, set yourself a goal. $3K a month, I can do this. Another $5K a month, I can hire a team member and then give myself 3 days time back to actually focus on high level things that are much higher value to me in the business. So that's the approach that I'll be taking, is always focus on how quickly can I get myself out of the business.
That's such good advice, mate. And if you were able to go all the way back to that, I think it was 13-year-old Sean that was starting on day one all over again, what would be the one piece of advice you've picked up to all these years with hindsight that you would tell that young Sean Soole?
I'm going to say there are two.
Yep.
This first one is, don't doubt the power of compounding, right? Which means back then, even if I invested 5% or 10% of what I was making, my asset base would be exponentially larger now than just spending it, right? And the other one is believe. Like, believe completely that I can do it, that you're capable of doing it. Because a lot of the time there I was attached to the how. I didn't think I was capable of doing it because I didn't know how to do it. Now, those two are two different things. Capability is what our baseline skill set and tenacity and drive and all that sort of stuff. The capability is the ability to learn how to do it. But when I blended the how with me not being capable just because I didn't know how, that was a massive handbrake. And until I separated the two and said, no, I have the capability to learn how to do that, I just got to find the person that teaches me. Suddenly the handbrake was off, changed my mindset. So that's what I would go back and say.
Amazing. What about one piece of advice for future Sean Soole?
Future Sean Soole. Interesting. I haven't had that question. I've always had the past one, not the future one. Continue to focus on being more present. That's something that I have had a challenge with throughout my life. Having some unique ways of processing information. I think people call it spectrum, and the way I see the world and stuff like that. I can often get very stuck in creativity in my head, in squirrel, and just all this sort of. I've noticed in the last 6 weeks I haven't been on time for anything. That's not like me. I'm like, something's going on. Our internal clock's gone or something. And I think it's because I've got all this stuff that I'm passionate about and in the process of creating, that it's consuming my, not only my conscious awareness, but a lot of my subconscious awareness, as well. And I need to come back to presence.
Amazing. I think most people can probably draw on that one, especially me on the other end of this conversation. And one piece of advice for the listeners in the context of wanting to become investors in their business.
Absolutely. That's a great question, and it's something that most people never think of. It's always that go from in to on the business, but you're looking at it from the wrong place. You have to look at it, get in the helicopter and fly right up high so you can see the entire business, the whole thing, right? That's where you make decisions from. If you're trying to make decisions from the bottom up, you're only ever trying to take something and improve it. You can see from the top down, you can make a decision that's going to have a profoundly stronger impact, much faster often, or much more deliberate, where over time, the compounding effects will be vastly more positive. And it's having that mindset of going, this business is an investment. I need to take my attachment out of it, because often in business, when we start, it's like a second head on our shoulders. It's if it's having a good day and saying nice things in our ear, we're having a good day. If it's having a crap day and it's yelling and screaming in our ear, we're having a crap day too. Right? It's like an extra head. We're going to take that head off and give it back to the business, treat it as its own separate entity. It is a vehicle to create wealth and choice. That's what a business is. Doesn't mean that you don't care about your team or your clients or whatever the case is. But businesses are, underlying that, a vehicle to create wealth and freedom for you and choice.
Amazing, mate. No doubt if someone has tuned in to this long into the episode, they've got a lot of value from the conversation that we've had. But you also have a very unique and one of the best offers that I've seen online called $100,000 extraction call. So people that might be curious about getting a sample or a taste of how you support other people, do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And this comes down to that thing of changing the world one person at a time, right? I don't have to just change people that I work with. What I've realized in time is I've been very generous with my time with people that may or may not work with me at any point. They're not necessarily working with me, and many of them don't. But what I've found is the more that I give, the more that I receive. And I'm not giving to receive. I'm giving because I love to give, but I've just seen the byproduct of that, right? Because I think the whole thing about that is about intentionality. The intention for me is give first, is service first. And so we came up with this concept and went, okay, well, to do with business owners that in essence are doing, you got to have something you can't multiply zero, right? So effectively with people that are earning more than 100 grand profit or 750 revenue, they've got to have the ability to start to invest in some strategies that will help them grow. So the concept of the $100,000 extraction call is that I will sit down with you for an hour at the time of doing this, because at some point in a year or two's time, maybe it won't be me. But right now, at the time of recording this podcast, I will actually be investing an hour of my time at no cost to show small business owners, because I'm a small business advocate, particularly in Australia and in New Zealand. We've got a lot of clients across the two countries. Is a small business advocate to help people understand a strategy that's going to help them to create an extra $100,000 in profit in the next 12 months. So the goal of the $100,000 extraction call is to create on that call a plan. If you do this, this is what the perceived value is likely to be. If we apply this strategy, this is what the value is likely to be. If we hire someone, it's going to cost that, but in a year, the outcome should be this. So we actually start to build out a plan. Okay. And so prior to that, we do a 15-minute call and ask you a series of questions that give us the background, so that when I'm on the call with you, I understand you and your business to a level where I can start making specific advice and guidance and all those sorts of things around what I perceive could benefit your business. Then at the end of that call, people can take that away. If I can't show them how to save 100, make an extra 100 grand in net profit in a year, I'll shout them dinner at their favorite restaurant, because there's not one business I've come across that I can't show that to. At the end, they'll get the plan and you can go and execute it. But what I know is that those people that really want it, those people that want to accelerate it, are going to say, shit, Sean, if you guys can do this in an hour, what's going to happen if I work with you guys for a year? Right? Because yes, there's a plan of this is what you need to achieve to get that. But if the how is the gap, and you needed to invest a small amount into achieving that $100,000, would you put $100 in a poker machine if you knew you were going to get $300 out? Absolutely. You'd probably stand there all day, keep putting it in, put 100 in, 300 out. That's not going to happen, obviously. But the point is, this is the whole point about business, is if you invest in you as the most valuable asset, because you're the handbrake and the accelerator in your business, if you invest in you and use a vehicle like what we do in Inner Circle or similar, but take it as you investing in yourself, then you will see those results. You will put the equivalent of $100 in and pull $300 out every time that you do it. Because if you've made that decision and you take and apply even 50% of the stuff that we teach, people have still achieved this result using 50% of the tools that we teach. You don't have to use all of them. Just use the most relevant ones. And that's it. So it's an hour with me to actually go through and dissect your business and give some ideas and strategies that you can apply either on your own or with support of somebody like me and my team.
Amazing, mate. We'll put a link to that opportunity in the description below this episode.
Thank you, Az.
Thank you, mate.